The air in the conference room felt like it had been filtered through a coffee filter made of broken dreams and printer toner. Claire sat at the far end of the long, fingerprint-smeared table, clutching her laptop like a life raft. Her palms were sweaty, but her spreadsheet was pristine. Months of late-night tweaking, debugging formulas with one hand while cradling a glass of boxed wine in the other. Model she was about to present could have shaved 14% off operating costs and improved fleet efficiency by 22%. She knew because she ran the simulations in her garage, using her personal laptop and a whiteboard that still had her ex's grocery list ghosting in the corner: eggs, condoms, toothpaste. She cleared her throat. So if we sequence cross-dock arrivals based on regional congestion data rather than fixed windows, Rick, the new manager, leaned back in his chair like he was waiting for a manicure, not a presentation. Claire, this all sounds very theoretical. It's predictive, she countered, based on real shipment logs. If we implement just the first layer, we don't need theory, he barked. We need results. This isn't Shark Tank. Stick to your lane. Laughter. Not from everyone, but enough. The kind that sounds like ball bearings in a blender, sharp, pointless, and painful. Claire's throat tightened as she stared down at her laptop, where her color-coded pivot tables still glowed defiantly, like loyal dogs waiting for a command that would never come. She closed the lid slowly. If she'd slammed it, that would have been emotional. She'd been called that once before after pointing out a typo in a male colleague's inventory report. Thanks for the feedback, she muttered, and felt the sentence lodge in her ribs like a rusty nail. Nobody said a word as she stood up, not even Jenna from HR, who once borrowed Claire's charger and never returned it. Oh, and hey, real quick before we go any further, if you're one of the 97% listening without subscribing, help a girl out. I'm trying to hit my first 10,000 subscribers so I can maybe, finally, afford a whiteboard that doesn't have my ex's handwriting on it. Smash that sub button like it's Rick's smug little face. All right, back to the trauma. That night, Claire went home and didn't cry. Not out of strength, she just didn't have time. She sat down, cracked open her ThinkPad, and backed up every file she'd ever touched. The algorithm wasn't some half-baked spreadsheet trick, it was her life. Born from 6 years in warehouse ops, refined during pandemic chaos, and coded with a kind of obsessive ferocity usually reserved for serial killers or Civil War reenactors. She built the prototype before she'd even joined the company. It lived on a USB drive shaped like a corgi that she kept clipped to her bra strap like a war medal. And Rick? Rick was a PowerPoint peacock, strutting buzzwords, feathers made of jargon, cawing about synergy and low-hanging fruit. He came from some boutique consultancy that helped ice cream chains leverage omnichannel scaling. The man thought RFID tags were a new type of crypto, but HR loved him because he used words like roadmap and stakeholder. And he hated Claire because she spoke fluent reality and made him look like the hollow mascot he was. The week after the meeting, Claire noticed her project calendar had been mysteriously reassigned. Her optimization module had been shelved. Just a pause, they said, but the pause only applied to her. Everyone else was suddenly too busy for syncs. Her name disappeared from project email threads. Jenna from HR stopped making eye contact. She wasn't fired. Not yet, that would be too clean. They were going to squeeze her out like expired mayonnaise, slow, passive, deniable. And Claire? She'd seen this movie before. That's why she printed every version of her model, uploaded it to 3 separate cloud drives, and mailed a backup USB to her sister in Tucson, who still thought Excel was a kind of salad. By the end of the month, she'd be gone. She knew it. But the algorithm, that was hers. She coded it before she had a badge, before she had a title, and they never asked her to sign it over. So Rick could smirk and HR could ignore her and Jenna could keep her damn charger. Claire would take her lack of vision and show them what blind ambition really looked like. Claire didn't even get an email. She found out her responsibilities had been slashed by accident. While checking the shared project tracker one Monday morning, sipping coffee that tasted like scorched regret. Her name was missing from the Q4 rollout, gone from the freight routing upgrades, scrubbed from the dashboard UI redesign she'd pitched in May. Just a neat little patch of digital amnesia where her workload used to live. She scrolled back up, blinked, then scrolled again. Nope, Rick had reassigned everything. No explanation, no meeting, just a silent little execution buried in Google Sheets. Later that afternoon, he poked his oversized head into her cubicle, like a prairie dog in business casual, and said with forced brightness, just making some strategic shifts. Want you laser-focused on warehouse ticketing workflows for now. Real hands-on. Hands-on turned out to mean auditing forklift battery logs and double-checking shipping labels. She had more responsibility working the concession stand in high school. Claire didn't argue. Arguing gave them a reason. And Rick didn't need a reason. He needed an excuse. So she smiled, nodded, and let him think she was eating the humiliation like a good little soldier. Then she went home and backed up everything. Her garage became a war room. Whiteboards covered in flowcharts. Laptop open. 3 external drives labeled Ahab, Megatron. And Rick can suck it. She encrypted the source code, split it across accounts, and even stashed a printed copy of the original draft in a shoebox under her bed, wedged between old tax returns and a wedding invitation from a couple who'd already divorced. The next morning, her badge didn't work at the side entrance. IT said it was a glitch. She was told to use the front door. Claire started to feel like a guest in a building she once kept running on caffeine and overclocked neurons. She called her friend Zoe, one of the few left in legal who wasn't trying to become a VP by selling their conscience at a markdown. Hey, quick question, Claire said, pretending to be casual while speed walking to her car during lunch. Remember the onboarding packet? Did it have a clause about IP? Like stuff created before I joined? Zoe didn't hesitate. Nope, I remember because I flagged it at the time. They only have rights to what you create during employment on company devices. Anything from before, that's yours unless you sign something extra. I didn't. Then tell Rick to choke on a stylus. Claire hung up and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel like it might fly away without her. The anger had calcified by now. What remained was something sharper, cleaner. Like ice or glass or the point of a fountain pen she was about to sign a new future with. They could take her projects. They could change her badge, but they couldn't touch the model. That was hers, built on her dime before she ever clocked in. She'd been coding that thing during her job hunt, eating canned chili and watching supply chain TED talks at 2 a.m., so she started laying digital breadcrumbs. Emails to her personal address. Screenshots of Slack threads. Download logs. Timestamps. Every breadcrumb forming a trail that said, this was mine before it was ever theirs. By Friday, she'd been assigned a shared desk near the kitchen. Someone had written Claire on a strip of masking tape and slapped it onto the edge like it was a locker in a middle school with asbestos problems. Across the aisle, Rick's newest hire, an agile delivery associate named Brennan who still said hashtag IRL, was given her old seat. Claire said nothing. She watched, listened, backed up more files. The clock was ticking. But for the first time, she wasn't scared of the countdown. She was waiting for the bang. It happened the way cheap breakups happen, quick, gutless, and via Zoom. Friday at 4:12 p.m., Claire got a calendar invite titled Quick Sync from HR. No subject line, no agenda, no Rick. The woman on the other end, Kendra from HR, who once complimented Claire's blazer while standing behind her in the bathroom line, read from a script like she was trying to win a local theater award for most dead-eyed monologue. Claire, as part of our strategic restructuring initiative, we are making efficiency-oriented personnel adjustments that unfortunately affect your current role. This is not a reflection of your performance. Claire blinked. Is this a layoff? Kendra's eyes did a quick dart to the left. Probably a sticky note. Yes, is Rick coming? There's no need. He signed the documentation already. Claire stared at her own reflection in the Zoom box, hair slightly frizzed, coffee stain on her collarbone, eyes too tired to even roll. She could feel her blood slowing down like the whole circulatory system had gone into nah, we're good mode. I see, she said. They offered her 4 weeks severance. Access to a resume polishing webinar, and a LinkedIn badge that said open to work, like that wasn't already tattooed across her aura. She signed everything, cashed the check, and didn't tell a single soul what she was really doing. No goodbye email, no LinkedIn announcement, no cardboard box selfie in the parking lot. Claire left the building that same day with nothing but her purse and her Corga-shaped USB drive, which held the backbone of a logistics system that could outthink Rick's entire department before breakfast. She drove home with the windows down, letting the air strip away what was left of that place. Her car still had the cloying smell of air freshener and stale fast food, but she didn't care. She smiled like someone with a secret, because she had one. Her prototype, OptiMesh V.4.9, was alive, breathing, practically begging for its final coat of polish. That night, she sat cross-legged on her garage floor surrounded by graphs, maps, code printouts, and a six-pack of gas station beer. She opened her laptop, pulled up her terminal window, and ran the diagnostic on her last simulation batch. No errors, not one. Forecast accuracy at 96%. Route efficiency gain, 23%. Idle dock time slashed in half. And that was with old data. She could see it now, live route syncing, container-level EATR recalibration, vendor adaptability scoring. The kind of stuff Rick thought only existed in PowerPoint mockups made by consultants who didn't know how a pallet jack worked. It was all there, and none of it belonged to him, or the company, or anyone but her. She ran one last test. The system responded like a dog hearing its name, loyal, alert, ready. Claire sipped her beer and stared at the screen, glowing back at her like a campfire for the vengeful. She'd been broken off and boxed up like a damaged SKU. But she wasn't done. She was upgraded, and so was her plan. The coffee shop was one of those chain-adjacent indie places, black chalkboard menu, fake succulents, chairs that looked like they were made by someone who lost a fight with IKEA instructions. Claire picked the booth furthest from the espresso machine, where the hiss of steamed milk wouldn't drown out her pitch, ordered a large drip and tried to ignore the tremble in her hands. It wasn't nerves. It was fury on a slow boil like a crock pot full of betrayal. At 11:02, Greg walked in, same cheap leather jacket, same buzz cut that said I've been to logistics hell and I'm still alphabetizing it. Greg was a former colleague, now something important over at Titan Freight, director of network optimization, or, as he once called it, head of fixing other people's dumb shit. He hugged in that half-awkward ex-coworker way, then sat. Claire wasted no time. She slid her tablet across the table and opened the app. No small talk, he chuckled. I only bought one coffee. I've got 30 minutes before this place fills with grad students pretending to write novels. She tapped the screen. A flowchart bloomed. Live mockup. Predictive analytics. Dock scheduling recalculated in real time based on congestion and weather API data. Greg's eyebrows shot up so fast they nearly knocked over his sunglasses. Hold on, he said, squinting. This is running live? Claire nodded. Wait, you built this before that job. I just finished optimizing the adaptive routing logic last week. He leaned back, silent for a second, the kind of silence you don't interrupt. Then he leaned forward again, closer this time. Claire, this is worth money. Like real money. She didn't blink. Then let's talk. 3 days later, she was standing in Titan Freight's Innovation Lab, an open concept sanctum with floor-ceiling whiteboards and engineers who wore hoodies like armor. No HR, no Rick, just algorithms, rubber warehouse mock-ups, and minds that didn't need to be sold on vision. They saw it like heat. She walked through the system again, this time in front of people who didn't smirk, interrupt, or mistake competence for arrogance. One guy asked, "What's your load balancing model based on?" Claire answered without notes. Another chimed in, "Can it auto-prioritize perishables during peak volume?" Already does. A woman in the back asked, "Who owns the IP?" Claire smiled. "I do." By the end of the meeting, they didn't shake hands, they handed her a draft agreement, licensing deal, consulting terms, and one line, buried halfway down the second page, made her heart pound like it was trying to break out of her ribs. Inventor, Claire Maddox. She asked them to bold it, they laughed and did it anyway. When she walked out of the building that afternoon, the sun hit her like a blessing. She wasn't some burned-out mid-tier cog with a severance check and a bruised ego. She was a creator, a licensed contractor, a woman with her name on the blueprint of the future, and a very good memory for the people who told her to stick to her lane. The cracks started small. A misrouted shipment here, a delayed offload there. A few whispers from former coworkers still trapped inside the system, people who'd once smirked behind their coffee cups while Rick gutted Claire's roadmap. Now they were biting their nails as pallet stacks went missing, trucks sat idle at the wrong docks, and client escalations became as routine as Monday status meetings. Claire didn't gloat, not outwardly, but every time she refreshed her news feed and saw another logistics bottleneck headline with her old company's name buried between the lines, a tiny part of her exhaled with satisfaction. She'd warned them. She'd offered them the cure before they even knew they were sick, but they chose to amputate the doctor. Rick, true to form, played the PR game like a man spinning plates on a trampoline. In an internal memo leaked to a friend of Claire's on Slack, he blamed legacy systems and Q3 transition friction. Code for, "It's not my fault and please don't look too closely." But people were looking. Hard. Truckloads were arriving at the wrong hubs. Vendor penalties were piling up like junk mail. Their internal warehouse team tried to blame outdated macros until someone pointed out Claire had been the one updating them in the first place, and they'd been locked out of the tool ever since she was streamlined. Meanwhile, over at Titan Freight, Claire's system had gone live in their northeast corridor. Pilots showed a 19% drop in turnaround time within 3 weeks. She got her first royalty check the same day a recruiter reached out to her for her old job. "I know it's a long shot," the recruiter said over the phone, clearly reading from a script, "but the company's looking for a candidate to step in and rebuild their logistics optimization team. They've struggled to find someone who understands the system they were hoping to implement." Claire leaned back in her chair, staring out at the skyline like it owed her money. "They didn't find anyone yet?" she asked, knowing the answer. "No, you'd actually be the second person we've tried to place there. First one walked after 2 weeks, said it was disorganized chaos wrapped in red tape." Claire chuckled. Not because it was funny, because sometimes the only appropriate response to cosmic irony is to laugh like a villain in a slow-motion explosion. She didn't say yes, didn't say no either, just told the recruiter she was currently under contract with another firm and wished them luck. Later that night, she opened her prototype dashboard again, now humming with Titan's pilot data. She saw her color-coded algorithms doing what they were born to do, fixing real-world problems, optimizing chaos, outperforming humans. It was beautiful, not because it worked, but because it worked without them. Claire poured herself a bourbon, sat on her balcony, and watched the city flicker like a motherboard. Somewhere across town, Rick was probably in a boardroom explaining away another failure with buzzwords dipped in bullshit. And somewhere on his desk, probably buried under excuses, was a printout of a job posting he didn't want to write, looking for a savior he'd already fired. The dam was leaking, the water rising, and the only bucket big enough to bail them out had her name stamped on the bottom. The press release dropped on a Tuesday morning like a grenade wrapped in a bow. Titan Freight unveils OptiMesh, AI-driven logistics platform designed by Claire Maddox. There it was, in bold font and corporate polish, her name printed right under the headline like it belonged there all along. A a clean headshot. IO trimmed for maximum impact, former systems analyst turned independent architect, and a brief summary of the new system's capabilities. Real-time doc sync, live inventory load balancing, predictive delivery models based on weather, regional flow, and seasonal vendor behavior. By noon, it was trending in every logistics forum worth a damn. Claire's LinkedIn lit up like a slot machine having a panic attack. Old conference contacts. Random interns. Even her ex from grad school, the one who thought a career in supply chains sounded too administrative. But none of it compared to the text she got at 12:47 p.m. from a number she hadn't seen since the last office holiday party. Wait, is this yours? It was from Mike, the junior analyst who once tried to explain blockchain to a vending machine. He hadn't even been on her team, but apparently the dots were finally connecting. Claire stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She typed yep, then deleted it. Typed was supposed to be yours too, deleted that too. Finally, she just sent a thumbs up emoji, the digital equivalent of a smirk, and then came the wave. One by one, ex-coworkers started liking the press release, sharing it, commenting things like well-deserved, and proud to have worked with Claire Maddox. Half of them never said a word when Rick gutted her roadmap. The other half probably helped. Still, she wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. Just aware of how fake office loyalty really was, of how fast people pivot when the spotlight shifts. She'd once been the background noise of meetings. Now she was a headline. And somewhere, Rick had to be reading it. She pictured him at his glass desk, eyes darting over the press release, jaw grinding behind his Invisalign, muttering Maddox, no, no, can't be, over and over while his assistant forwarded him 3 separate emails with subject lines like Claire Maddox, any relation to OptiMesh? He'd have to explain it soon. To leadership, to the board. Maybe to the investors who were now asking why their company wasn't innovating like Titan was, because Claire's face was on the homepage. Her name was in the patent registry. And the software that could have been their saving grace was now a licensed product from their competitor. She did a quiet lap of her apartment that night, wine in one hand, phone in the other, heart hammering not from fear but adrenaline. Success didn't feel the way she thought it would. It wasn't confetti and applause, it was stillness. A long, electric breath, but part of her braced for impact. She knew Rick, knew how desperate people got when cornered by their own mediocrity. Knew he'd try to spin it, discredit it, maybe even find a way to pretend he'd inspired it. But he was out of moves because Claire hadn't just left a company. She'd launched a missile, and it had her name etched on the warhead. The email hit her inbox like a ghost from a bad dream. Subject, license inquiry OptiMesh platform. Claire skimmed the body once, then twice, then again just to savor it. Titan's legal team had forwarded her the request. The originating domain, her old company. The contact listed. Rick Mendoza at Freightrek Solutions.com. No hi Claire. No acknowledgement of irony. Just a stiff block of corporate formality, asking for an estimate on enterprise-level licensing of the OptiMesh system for integration across 3 regional hubs. Claire let out a laugh so sharp it startled her cat off the windowsill. Rick, the same man who told her she lacked vision, who mocked her during a department meeting like he was doing stand-up in front of a captive audience of people too scared to cough. Now he needed her. She reread the email with a glass of Merlot and a smile that could slice through tempered steel. Her Titan rep asked if she'd like to suggest terms personally, since, as the lead architect, any platform extension or adaptation would fall under her discretionary purview. Claire didn't hesitate. She opened the licensing template, renamed it FTS Rate Sheet Final, and got to work. First, she doubled the base rate. Then she added an enterprise surcharge for multi-hub integration with some creative language that basically charged them extra for using the system in more than one building at a time. Then came the clause, her favorite part. All feature request tickets, change orders, and integration queries must be submitted to and approved by the platform's architect, Claire Maddox. No third-party vendor modifications permitted without written authorization. In other words, if Rick wanted a new button, a dashboard tweak, a color change, he'd have to ask her, directly, or sit in silence while his ops team screamed over misaligned shipment flags. Claire hit send and leaned back, her spine straight with the kind of posture only revenge can teach you. She imagined the moment Rick would read her name in the contract draft. The heat rising behind his ears. The realization that the system he dismissed, shelved, and starved of oxygen was now his only escape from the operational hell he created. And the gatekeeper? The woman he tried to erase. She didn't want thanks, didn't need groveling. All she wanted was that moment, that sharp, acidic realization crawling down Rick's throat like vinegar, that he was now leasing his future from the person whose ideas he called theoretical noise. Claire was no longer the applicant. She was the approval process. The first integration call was scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. sharp, but Claire logged in 10 minutes early. She wasn't showing her face, of course, just a blank screen with her initials, CM. No camera, no mic. All questions were funneled to a private, monitored email chain where she responded when she felt like it, and only when the question didn't insult her intelligence. The meeting opened with corporate pleasantries, everyone pretending like the room wasn't thick with the scent of desperation. Claire sipped her coffee as she watched the familiar parade of faces from her old company, shuffling papers, adjusting webcams, pretending they weren't drowning. And then there he was, Rick Mendoza, hair grayer, eyes heavier, that faux enthusiastic voice sharpened by sleepless nights and too many executive reviews. He was already sweating before the PowerPoint started. All right, he began, flipping to a slide that looked like it had been designed by a confused AI. We're working on implementing the Opti-Mesh framework into our existing WMS. We've outlined some key alignment steps, but some of the language in the deployment instructions was a bit abstract. Claire smirked. It wasn't abstract. He just didn't understand it because he'd never bothered to. Because he never thought he'd have to. They tried to walk through feature toggles, data sync latency issues, KPI thresholds that had been clearly explained in the documentation Claire herself wrote. But Rick stumbled through it all like a man trying to defuse a bomb using IKEA instructions. At one point, someone asked how the system calculated predictive delays based on vendor history. Rick blinked, glanced down at his notes, and muttered, "That's part of the neural mapping function?" It wasn't. It was a weighted logistics regression Claire had coded after a 3-day weekend in her garage with no heat and a head cold. The call dragged on. Questions piled up. Frustration mounted. Claire responded to only 3 of the 12 emailed queries. Her answers were concise, clinical, and cold as dry ice. Then came the moment. Rick leaned into his mic, voice tight and forced. Would it be possible to schedule a call with the developer directly? I think it'd help the team better understand some of the back-end logic. The Titan consultant running point glanced off-screen for approval. A pause. Claire's response hit the email thread moments later. She declines. 2 words, final, surgical. Rick's face twitched. The room went silent, the kind of silence that only happens when a man realizes the rope he tied is now around his own neck. Claire watched him fidget, his usual arsenal of platitudes and corporate smirks failing him one by one. This wasn't a team sync. This was a reckoning. He had no roadmap, no workaround, nobody in the dev team to pull strings for him, because she was the dev team now. She was the roadmap. Claire logged off at 11:03 just as Rick started fumbling through a question about interface load speeds. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. She had already buried him in his own dashboard. Leak hit Reddit first, of course it did. Some middle-tier analyst, probably fed up with Rick's Monday morning meltdowns, dropped a screenshot from the company's quarterly expense summary onto a logistics subthread like a digital confession. Line 47, External Consulting C. Maddox Solutions amount, $638,000 Q1 Delta, plus 23% ops. Spend. The comments section lit up like a Christmas tree wired wrong. Former employees chimed in with popcorn emojis. Industry nerds speculated wildly. Someone even posted a side-by-side of Rick's last keynote headshot and Claire's patent photo with the caption, "When you fire your brain and rent it back at 6 figures a quarter." Within hours, a second leak surfaced, this time, an internal memo written by the CFO. While the OptiMesh platform is delivering strong performance, its cost-to-ownership model is higher than initially forecasted. We recommend revisiting our vendor agreements and integration scope for Q3. Translation: we didn't read the fine print, and now we're hemorrhaging cash to the person we told to shut up and fetch forklift logs. Claire read the memo from her phone while waiting for her espresso at a startup incubator downtown. The barista called her name just as her Titan royalty deposit hit her account, $178,612.96. She stirred her drink with the receipt, took a sip, and smiled. Rick resigned the following week. Pursuing new opportunities, the press release said, as if he hadn't been shoved out the loading dock by shareholders who finally realized their boy wonder had the leadership instincts of a rusted shopping cart. Claire didn't gloat, not publicly, she didn't need to, because every invoice that hit their inbox now carried her watermark. Every feature request had to crawl through her inbox. Every new region they tried to scale into, another check with her name in the top right corner. Her lack of vision was now their most expensive asset. With the payout, she signed the lease on a small office above a Thai restaurant, bare walls, 1 window, and just enough space to house 2 desks, 3 laptops, and the startup she never got to build before Rick shelved her. She named it Second Rail Technologies, a quiet jab at every executive who ever said plan was all that mattered. And before her Titan contract auto-renewed, she sent them a note. "Thanks for the continued partnership. Just FYI, Second Rail will not be exclusive in Q4. No smiley face. No exclamation point. Just a clear signal that the girl they underestimated was now the woman setting market rates. And this time, no one could tell her to stay in her lane. She owned the road. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.